Good morning. Today is the 26th of Elul, the 12th of September, and we're on page Tetvav at the very end. Hagam shebishat matan Torah, even though during the giving of the Torah, nigla gam ken pnimiut kmo shekatuv panim bepanim, the inner dimension of Torah was also revealed, as it says, face to face. And the word face also means inner. So פנים בפנים דיבר השם אלוקיכם עמכם, אבל אין זה עדיין רק בפנימיות הנשמה שהוא בחינת יחידה. So we said this was only experienced by the highest aspect of the soul, but it wasn't revealed to the body. אבל העתיד לבוא, in the future, יתגלה עצם היחידה בגילוי בגוף. The יחידה will be revealed in the body itself. Good question. Good question. I'm not sure. I don't think it's only after Tchias HaMesim, but could be. I have to say something here. There's a tendency when people hear this to say, oh, this is the source that today you should be doing body work. You know what body work is? It's dealing with trauma and other things through the body. Well, trauma is fine. Let's put that aside. But dealing with any kind of psychological issues. And people doing all kinds of meditations that have to do with the body and all the stuff that's around the body. The reason it's become so popular is because of yoga. That's really I think, yoga, martial arts, all these things, they pushed a direction of working with the body. And they might come and say, you can guess who said this, because not very many people have taught this this mimer from Reb Hillel. But the person who has taught it has a whole section in his book in Hebrew about why this is a source for body work, and why, as we near the redemption, there's more and more work that involves the body, psychological work that involves the body. Even more than that, maybe there's even people that study Torah through the body, and so on. You don't know any of this because it's not your milieu, right? It's not exactly where you hang out. But there's a lot of this going on in the world now. So I wrote to Rav Ginsburg. I showed him the passage. He knows the passage. He's taught this in the past. There's other passages that are like it also. And I asked him, so do you think this is an approbation for doing body work? He was very adamant that it's not. Very. Like, I seldom hear him so clear on something. And he said, you cannot trust this type of work at all if it's based on the body. It remains that our work is spiritual and not physical. In any case.
This body work leads to bad behavior.
It leads to, you're right, it leads to a sense of conceit, of self-centeredness.
Leads to people doing
even worse things, right?
based on that.
Right, no, it's 100%. Literally, what you're saying is one of the clearest indications that this is not the right time or possible yet, because so many of these types of modalities, they end up being granting some kind of permission for people to act promiscuously. And it's very, very common. It's not just, you said it like, the fact that you know that just tells me how common it is. Like, I thought it was uncommon, but it's more common than I'd like to even think. In any case, and then the infinite will also be revealed, he's saying here, not just in our body, but when he says body, it doesn't mean necessarily my body, to which I am privileged and I am connected and so on. He means in the whole body of reality, in the physical matter. Hayesh Gashmi, Ya'ir v'yitgale b'chinat yesh amiti. And then this, the table, if you can say that about the table, that you feel that the infinite light is in the table, you're experiencing the infinite light in the table, then maybe that time has come. In any case, because of this new revelation that's coming about, the sages said, that the moment that the temple was destroyed, the Mashiach was already born. What do they mean to say? They mean the light of Mashiach, meaning the possibility of Mashiach is already there. By the way, this leads to a very interesting question to which I don't want to give my answer, but I'll raise the question. And the question is, there's a medrash that says that the history of the world is 6,000 years divided into three parts. 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah, and 2,000 years of Mashiach. You're very familiar with that. So here the other statement is saying that when the temple was destroyed, the years of Mashiach started. Mashiach was born. So we're talking about now the time of Mashiach is actually now. When was the temple destroyed?
Long time ago.
Yeah. How many years ago? In what year was it destroyed? Say it like that. No. What year from the creation? Because we have to work with creation, because it's 2,000 years of chaos, 2,000 years of Torah. So with 2,000 years of Torah, everybody's very particular to make it work exactly, because the Torah was given in 2,448. So that's not exactly 2,000 years of chaos. That's like 2,448 years of chaos. But the way that it's explained is, no, the preamble as a word to Torah was the patriarchs. And Avram was 52 when he started making converts to Torah, to the Torah that he had in Haran. And that was exactly the year 2000. Because he was born in 1948. So he was 52 in the year 2000, and that's when we start counting the 2,000 years of Torah. So this fits relatively well with our whole take here, because the Torah was like already by Avram, but in Avram's faith was right in a primordial form. Let's call it an earlier form. But what about the year that the temple was destroyed? Was that the year 4000? When was it? According to our years. Well, it's 172 years before the year 4000. Okay? So there's a discrepancy, and I've never seen anyone try to explain it except for one person who I won't mention, because if I mention his book, then everybody will know what my answer is. And I don't want to say my answer, because I think my answer is no. So I said that about Avram, they're very particular. They want to get it to exactly 2000.
Well, they managed to work that one out.
So there's always that possibility. I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying that by Avram, you see that they are particular to make it work exactly in 2000. There's no such attempt with the destruction of the temple, even though it would seemingly be easier. Why not say, for instance, and this is clearly a possibility, that what happened 172 years after the temple was destroyed, according to the Gemara? They're very particular. They just don't connect it. They don't say anything. After the temple was destroyed 172 years later, meaning at the year 4000 exactly, the Mishnah was signed. So that's interesting, because like you're saying that that's the end of Torah, and the beginning of Mashiach is with the signing of the Mishnah, the finalization of the text of the Mishnah. So that needs a lot of thought. Like, what do you do with these 172 years? In any case, let's continue. ולכן אמרו, דהיינו מחמת שנולד משיח נתעורר במקור למעלה מוחין יותר גבוהים כנ"ל. Because Mashiach was born, meaning the light of Mashiach, the Torah of Mashiach is now already being awakened above, then that causes the destruction of the temple. he's not just saying, he's saying the destruction of the temple is for two reasons. There's the reason of our sins, but as we talked about this, there was this whole question of what were the sins. Sages never come to an agreement on what the problem was, because there were no prophets to come and say, from God's point of view, this is what you're doing wrong. So there's a lot of speculation, but also it seems like there's many possibilities. And maybe the sins were not the most important part. What he's saying here is that probably there were sins, there were problems, there were natural reasons for it. It was like a natural disaster. Why do I say natural? Because maybe the temple didn't need to be destroyed, because if the Jews would have cooperated with one another instead of burning each other's food, maybe they could have lasted, and the Romans would have gone home and said, forget about these Judeans, who cares about them? And maybe the whole history would have been different. Maybe the Romans would have accepted Judaism as their monotheism instead of Christianity a few hundred years later. In any case, what he's saying is that according to our outlook here, what caused the destruction was that something new had to be revealed. And the temple as it stood was not fitting for that type of revelation. ולכן חרב בית המקדש ונסתלק גילוי הקודם כנה שהתעוררות היא סיבת ההסתלקות. The awakening of this new mindset is the reason for the destruction. Again, I think that both answers are correct. But from his point of view here, he's not interested in the historical reasons or the religious reasons or things like that. He's looking at the development of God's presence in reality. He says the reason is because he had to raise the old to allow the new to come in. ובסדר זה שנתמעט גילוי אלוקות בעולמות וגילוי התורה דור אחר דור, כמו דורות התנאים והאמוראים והגאונים הדורותינו, אלא עקבא דמשיחא, שהם בחינת הגביים ממש. And then we have the exact same thing as what happened in Egypt, that from generation to generation there's a lessening of the light of Torah. The previous Torah is disappearing, as it were. This is a very interesting thing, because we seem to think that, there's more and more Torah. Not less and less. But what are we saying? That the revelation is gone. The revelation is long gone. There's no revelations like that anymore. So one of the last statements of that is something the Rebbe likes to quote, that until the Shach and the Taz, whatever was written with the divine inspiration, with Ruach HaKodesh. But from the Shach and the Taz, we're talking about the late 16th century, beginning of 17th century. So there's no more divine inspiration. I mean, it doesn't mean that there isn't any at all. It's just saying that the Torah that's being written is not necessarily divinely inspired. Whereas before that, everything was divinely inspired. Yeah. So that's a lessening. But we know that the sages of the Talmud, the Amoraim, already say that if the early generations were like angels, we're like human beings. And if we're like human beings, if they were like human beings, then we're like donkeys. So they themselves recognize that there's less and less revelation. Meaning God is receding, as it were. Or at least the mindset that revealed God in the time of the temple, that's receding, that's disappearing from the world. And that's called Ikvata de Mashiach. That's called the heels of Mashiach. Why heels, by the way? The simple explanation is, as the Talmud says, that the heel doesn't feel anything. So much so that it doesn't feel anything, that it, even in the Talmud, it's sometimes likened to the angel of death. Because there's no feeling there. So people may be talking, but they don't feel what they're talking about. And we talked about this, I think, in length many times. The Baal Shem Tov's whole question about why does a woman bring the pot to ask whether it's kosher or treif? You don't need the pot. Nobody cares about the pot. Just tell me what you did. I don't need to look at the pot. But she has like a naive, simple understanding of halacha. She says, if it's treif, you must be able to see it. There must be a way to see it. So of course I'll bring it to the posek. I'll bring it to the person who's going to rule on it. But he looks at it and he says, I don't know what to see here. All I can do is do the math, as it were, about whether in the end this path is straight or not.
We never said that. It's a very interesting concept. This is the concept.
ולכן כתיב סוכת דוד הנופלת תדיר. And that's why we have this verse from Amos 9:11, almost like our date. Yesterday was 9/11. So if we would have read this yesterday, it would have been very punctual. But in any case, that's why the Prophet Amos says that there is a state of being fallen in the canopy of David. What is the canopy of David? The canopy of David, as we know, means understand. Like this is a famous Baal Shem Tov that you for sure you've heard that. Why does it have to say that they will seek both God and their King David? Because seeking God is one thing, seeking David is another thing. To seek King David, to seek the house of David, is to see divine providence in everything. Meaning it's to see the revelation of godliness. But we're in a state of Sukkot David Anofelet, that the canopy of David is constantly falling, meaning there's less and less revelation of godliness. You don't see revelation. שמיום שרב בן המקדש אין לך יום שאין קללתו מרובה מחברו, מפני שההסתלקות היא בעילוי אחר עילוי. And safe to say, from the day that the temple was destroyed, you have no day that is not worse than the day before it. What does that mean, worse? It has more curses. The curse, of course, is not seeing godliness. Because if you see godliness, you can bear anything. But if you don't see godliness, you're lost. And this is all because the previous revelation of God is receding more and more from reality. And we'll end here, and God willing, continue tomorrow.